darkest hours.
Greetings, I'm Krista Jan Ryan, and I am your host today for Recovery from Religion, where we learn to live in the acceptance of our losses and look for the hope and healing through Jesus Christ. Welcome to my show. I have a very exciting, I am excited. I don't get this excited much, but I am excited that we have Spike Whitmire on my show today, and it's kind of one of those things where I just kind of decided this is what needed to be done, and so we just got in contact, and it's just wonderful. He's a friend. Our kids are friends. Yeah. We've known each other for the year. You know, I know your wife, who's just the most, just beautiful wife, and one of our mutual friends who's actually in prison actually just got a very nice letter from her, and he was very thrilled. Yeah. Peter was really thrilled, and I thought it was great because, I don't know, Diane is just this, to me, she seems like such a sensitive human being, and I just think of her in a household full of males.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so welcome to the show, and we have some wonderful new things that are happening in your life if there isn't enough going on right now.
Yeah.
So you've actually stepped up to the plate to run for state senate.
Yeah, Bennington County in Vermont.
Wow.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Yeah.
God bless you.
I've been thinking about it for a while, a few years. I kind of thought this would come a couple years from now, but I just, I was thinking about it, and there was an opportunity, and a couple months ago I said, you know what, I got to get my feet wet, so let's just do it.
Oh, you're going to get wet.
Yeah.
Well, they say timing is everything.
Yeah.
We can't, I know I can't, but I don't think any of us can, pick the timing, because when the timing comes, the timing's here.
Right.
All of a sudden it's like, oh no, it's here.
Right.
I know you've been wanting to wait until Micah, who's like, what? He's got to be junior?
He's
a junior.
He's going
now.
into his 11th grade year.
And I noticed you were driving his beautiful new truck.
Well, actually, that one's mine. He's got one just like it. Yeah, we're a C10 family.
Wow,
Yeah.
Cool. That's cool.
But he's a junior. I was assuming that, this, phase of my life would start when he graduated, but I just felt the urge to do it now and
Good for you.
go for it. Yeah.
So was there anything else that kind of prompted you? Had you just kind of woke up one morning and said, I think I'll run for Senate?
Well, obviously it's something I've thought about for years now.
Really?
Yeah. And secretly I've always been very interested in that
word.
Yeah. Realm.
Yeah, that's good. That's
community
a realm.
service. Yeah. And as we'll talk about, I'm sure I've had a life of community service.
You sure have.
And it's kind of a natural progression because it's kind of still serving the people and still serving the needs of people, just in a different way by representing them.
Yeah, to me, you're getting down to the core. The core of when you look at all of the service that you have done, which has been, prison ministries, right down to the youth, right down to, being a home builder, knowing how to service people to be able to own a home. That to me is just incredible. And to really understand the plight. There's nothing else. I'm sorry, I can't use another word, but the plight of what's going on in Bennington.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine anybody who hasn't had the experience that you've had.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's a kind of firsthand experience,
Hands-on.
Yeah.
Big time.
And so I'm looking forward to it. I really would like to. I've seen the effects of government done right and government done wrong and how it affects everyone. And I just would like to represent the people of Bennington County, so they have a voice and have a say in what happens in Montpelier. Which it hasn't always been the case. Frankly, it's very rarely the case that we the people, know what's happening in Montpelier and actually have a voice.
I certainly don't.
As well.
I certainly have no idea what's going on there.
Right, and that's just fundamentally wrong in my book. I think, as the the way it typically works nowadays, we vote for our representatives and our senators, and then that's really the last voice we have when we cast our vote on election day, and then they kind of go do what they want and just tell us what happens, or we find out what happens when our tax bills come and when these things that affect our lives happen. And so I really wanted to give everyone in Bennington County a voice, and I'm hoping to be more bring transparency to government. Let everyone in the county know what's happening weekly, not at the end of the session, but weekly what's going to be debated on, weekly what's going to be voted on.
Yeah.
And give them a chance to voice their opinion to me, so I can then go and accurately represent them. And I just think that's the way it should be. I think that's the way it was originally intended to be that way. And somehow we've, gotten off on, partisan politics, and political agendas, and the real will and the real voice of the people has been lost in that. And so I'm hoping to change that.
Well, I know we sure need it. I've been very disturbed just because I think what we're witnessing in Bennington and Rutland, and I'm not so sure, Brattleboro, is, rogue politics. Obviously, I mean, when you look at the end results of what is happening, you ask yourself, how did this happen? Where does it start? Who's responsible? And I mean, I can't imagine that you're going to get in and flip a switch.
No.
Obviously, it's going to be a very tedious, and and believe me, I will pray for patience for you, because it's and it might not even, a lot of the work that you want to do might not even happen in the first 2 years.
Right.
I mean, realistically speaking.
Yeah, you have to be realistic, and we certainly don't want to deceive people to think that we can snap our fingers and change everything and make everything right, but we can start to turn the ship in the right direction, and that's what we need to do.
Adjust the sails.
Yeah,
Adjust
exactly.
the sails. And I know for me, I'm not even a Vermonter. I mean, are you a born and raised Vermonter?
No. I mean,
not?
I've been around Vermont most of my life, but I was born in Alaska, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when did you come to Vermont?
When I was about 3 years, I was almost 50 years ago. I'm 52.
So your parents kind of came down to this area.
Yeah. My father was working on Army bases, and I ended up being born in Alaska when it was, I think, 70 below zero.
That night when you were born?
In February, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so Vermont's actually warm compared to...
Warm compared to Alaska. So
Yeah.
your parents came down here. So you've been here for, a couple of generations.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Pretty much my whole life, and especially my adult
So
life.
did you settle in the Bennington area?
Yeah, I mean, when I grew up as a kid, we lived within a stone's throw of the Vermont border.
On the New York side?
Yeah, on the New York side. And then, when I got married to Diane, we, naturally kind of migrated to Vermont, yeah. And we've lived on both sides of the border, but we love Vermont, and we love Bennington. And
So you've seen a lot of
no place
changes
like it.
come and go.
Yeah.
Obviously. Seen
Yeah.
a lot of changes come and go. And I think as we get older, just myself, I can speak for myself, I think I'm just a little bit more awake as to what's really going on, because like I said, you start looking at the end results of certain things and you start questioning, like, how did we get here?
Right.
How does this happen? What's the case? And I know it's not a state problem. We know it's not a state problem. We don't even want to go where that whole problem is. But I know one of the things that I was very inspired that Trump did before he, whatever that whole 2020 mess was. One of the things he was very, very, very firm about was returning the power back to the the states. And I was really watching Texas for a long time. And then after I was watching that, then all of a sudden I started focusing in on Vermont. And I think that was really my big wake-up call, was when I started to see what was going on. Because I don't think Vermont has been this bad for maybe, I mean, what do you know? How many, 20 years, 22 years?
It's been a slow...
Progression.
Yeah. Yeah,
been a
for
slow
sure.
regression. And
Right. And we know because we can compare it to 30 years ago in Vermont.
exactly.
And that's what scares me about the next generation. This is the norm for them, so they don't really
Seeing
realize.
somebody push their entire household items that they own down a shopping cart
Yeah,
down the street in Bennington to
Right.
go to the next location of where they're going to pitch their tent or put their box. And when you think of the history of what Bennington had aspired from, not to, but had aspired from, I've gone and looked up historically, how it used to be a thriving town, thriving, and there, it used to just be a bustling community. I mean, it's still bustling now,
yeah,
but nowhere in the significance of what's happened.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's certainly changed, but I love Bennington. I love Vermont. I'm very optimistic that with some good moral changes, some good economical
judicial.
change. Yeah, judicial change. We could Vermont will and Bennington will perk back. Yeah, but we have to get down to the issues. We have to not just think we can always just spend money and think problems will go away. We need to look at what's going on. We need to look for solutions on both sides of the aisle, frankly. I am running as an independent, and one of
Yeah,
the
I thought
reasons.
that was an interesting choice.
Yeah, because frankly, I want to represent people and not a party. And again, I think it's a real disservice when one particular party has the majority, and the other people are ignored, and there's way too many partisan fighting and everything, which really leaves the will of the people and the good of the people behind as they're fighting. And so I just want to bring represent everyone. They're just saying that the right's not always wrong, and the left's not always right, and the right's not always wrong.
Right.
and there's this
Absolutely.
feeling up there that that everybody's one side or the other's right or wrong all the time. And the truth is there's some good partisan middle road on things, and we can if we put all the fighting aside and political agendas aside and just put the will of the people as our priority, I think we can change Vermont and get back to where we used to be.
I mean, to me, I thought it was, that's the way it was supposed to be. I mean, that's what the Constitution had been written for.
Right.
Was not only the will, but also for the happiness and the welfare of the, and I know for me, I had to learn the hard way, especially with the school system, because I came from a school system that back then, and I'm talking 30 years ago, it was $18,000 to $19,000 to send your child to school. I mean, that's how much the school got.
Yeah.
And it was one of these mornings, and I was so upset with what was happening with one of my sons, and I was riding this bike with a school teacher, and she just looked at me, and she said, "You have got it all wrong, Krista." She goes, "Your taxes pay them, they work for you. And then for you to go in and allow them to be intimidate you,
Yeah.
you've got it all backwards.
Yeah.
They work for you."
Right.
And I just all of a sudden what? Why didn't I ever think, and I just kind of, because I don't know, I just thought I'm not a school teacher. I have no idea that, whether or not my voice counts. I know my child counts, but so
Yeah.
that changed a lot of things for me, especially with how I dealt with my kids, going into the school system and what their needs were and what their needs weren't being fulfilled.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we did have talked a little bit on school issues and school reforms.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've had two boys. You have Micah, who's in school, junior, and
Yeah.
Levi, who just,
Yeah.
well, he's been out for a while.
Right,
But,
right.
I mean, you sat through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And lucky you've had, kids that weren't high needs. You didn't have kids that had any real high needs. So.
Right. Well, I've been fortunate enough to be the school board president of a private school in Bennington.
Wow.
For about 6 years now, and so I really could see even behind the scenes the challenges facing our schools. Obviously, like you
Huh,
said, every
I
child's
didn't know
different.
that. I didn't know you were doing that.
Yep. And it's given me an insight into, the schools, and we can step back and say, oh, point fingers and say this is wrong, this is wrong.
Doesn't get anything done.
No, right. And sometimes there's challenges the administrations of the schools have and they're faced with, but I do think we can do it better. And I think the public schools can do it better. Vermont supports public schools. I think we're the fourth. We spend the fourth largest amount per student in the country, if my facts are right.
Kidding
Yeah.
me?
So we do not skimp in Vermont.
Wow. So what's it going to?
Well, that's the thing.
Sports? I mean,
I don't know. A lot of different things it goes to. My point with that is I think in this environment that we're in right now, economic environment with inflation going crazy for the last 5 years, I think on average, Vermonters are faced with a 20% increase if you add up all the inflation for the last 5 years, and then on top of that, schools are raising their budgets, which are causing property taxes to skyrocket. Most Vermonters in Bennington County are going to get a tax bill this year in November that's going to be anywhere from 5 to 15% more than it was last year. And they're saying, the legislature that approved this increase are saying it's because of the school costs. And so, Vermont, there's, if we're number 4 in the state or in the country of what we spend, there's 48 other, there's a lot of other states that
to compare
spend,
it to.
yeah, they spend.
So what are they doing with it?
Well,
That's
I hope to become state senator and bring some insight to that and some accountability to that, because frankly, Vermonters in Bennington County can't keep shouldering the burden
of that. And
Right.
they're on, everybody's got a set income.
Yeah.
Everybody has a set budget. I mean, 20% would just about throw me over the edge.
Right.
Right?
It's yeah, and
I mean, I've been having to absorb it through gas and food, and
Yeah.
then you tack on another 20% just in taxes.
Yeah, well, anywhere from 5 to 15% extra just 1 year. And this is a trend that's been going up every year. Our taxes go up. Our tax bills go up.
It's like the slow boiling frog.
Yeah,
And then finally the frog
Right.
is boiled to death and dead.
right.
Right?
And and on top of that, Vermonters they're expecting almost a 20% increase in healthcare premiums next year.
Oh my God.
And so, I mean, these are just issues that it's unsustainable. And so we have to find a way to have quality education, but do it effectively and efficiently. And I think that's where we need to look into is how can we make our schools more efficient fiscally, because Vermonters can't just keep paying more money every year for school.
We don't have it.
Right.
We don't have it,
And I'm
period.
convinced that we can have excellent education, and I'm absolutely for excellent education. I don't want to have any cuts that would change that, but there's ways that we can save money, and we need to find them. And all too often, our government just has a blank check, and
crazy.
and we can't do that any longer. Vermonters cannot keep doing this, and so.
Well, we were having a very interesting conversation the other night when you were talking about how COVID just kind of set the trend with all of this infiltration of extra money, and then all of a sudden we get to 5 years down the line and there's no more influx of support coming from COVID.
Yeah.
But yet, the spending habits have been with the amount of influx of money that's come in. So they already have reached a spending quota
Yeah.
that they now have to reel themselves back with because you were telling me that it's been cut. It's we're no longer getting it.
Right, right. Which is really poor leadership at the school level.
Well, it's the
They should have the
debt-based
foresight to realize that a lot of these grants and funds that weren't going to be there forever. And they shouldn't, produce budgets that we're going to
Based on
rely on those amount of funds.
Absolutely.
But yeah, change has got to happen in the education system. And again, I want excellent education. I don't want any children left behind. I want to meet the needs of everyone. And I think we can do that if we just bring accountability and efficiency to the schools.
Two very big words.
Yeah.
And, I think maybe there should be a little time redirecting the, maybe Webster's dictionary of what those two words mean. But we also got into a really great conversation about housing because you're a contractor. You've been building houses forever. I mean, that's been your lines of being able to make money, right, for income.
Yeah.
So we talked about the whole housing thing.
Yeah. And they're connected, frankly. There's a real housing crisis in Bennington.
Yeah, you think?
And that housing crisis, because there's a shortage of housing, is driving the price up, supply and demand. And with that driving up the price, it's making home ownership unaffordable to many, many Vermonters. And again, it goes, a issue with it is the taxes that are being paid. I mean, when your property tax goes up, that means your monthly mortgage goes up because your property taxes are escrowed into your mortgage in most cases. And so, if a first-time home buyer, if they can, in theory, qualify for a $200,000 loan because, their debt-to-income ratio is this much, when you all of a sudden have to add another 15% taxes, all of a sudden the amount of money the amount of house that you can afford has to be lowered because your property taxes is taking that up. And so they're faced with first-time homeowners. They're being able to afford less because they have to pay more in taxes, but yet the housing prices are going up. And so the only way to solve that issue is to stop the tax increases that continue to trend upward every year. Again, going back to schools, a lot of it is, paid to the schools, and we need to find ways to make schools more efficient, but maintaining their excellence and efficient and effectiveness teaching our children.
So I know another thing that we had really talked about, and I think it's pretty important because I'm watching it, especially because I work up in Manchester. And I'm sure you see it as a builder, but this whole thing that's happening with the zoning. Or should I say what is not happening with the zoning. And I came from an area for 45 years where the zoning was extremely rigid because they wanted to keep the quality of the area down to why people come here. I mean, that's why people come to Vermont. They come up here for the maple syrup and the hiking and the skiing. And, I think for the most part, collectively, when the zoning, people work with, or the Architectural Review Board and the builder and the zoning and the building permits all kind of work together, if people can afford it. I mean, what I'm seeing up in Manchester is a huge balloon of building that's going on, and there's still no zoning up there.
Yeah.
And I'm not even so sure they're even requiring building permits. And the only thing I remember with most of the stuff that goes on up in, with the building is the only time anything comes in to get checked is when it's getting assessed for an increase in taxes.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so, what's that going to look like after 10 years of Boston moving here, 10 years of Hartford moving here, 10 years of New York City moving here? I mean, to me, I would think, I hope this isn't going to be a case where we shut the door after the horse got out.
Well, I think in general, Vermonters have enough laws. And we shouldn't be always looking to make more laws. I think rather we should be looking to go back and look at the ones we already have and see if we can make them better or update them because things change. And I know Act 250 has been a real sticking point with regulations with new ownership and subdivisions and such. And so I know they've made some progress with looking at Act 250 and loosening up a little bit. I think they can still do better with that. You know, the thing is, you know, and I think we share this belief that, you know, Vermont's beautiful. Bennington's
that's
beautiful.
why we're all here.
And we want to keep Bennington beautiful. But yet we have to have places to build homes for the people
Absolutely.
to live. And not just all high-end upscale houses. We need affordable housing and affordable home ownership.
Realistic home owners
Yeah.
for the average person who's just earning a living.
Right. And so we have to have places for those. And so we need to allow, you know, development and subdivisions, but be environmentally sensitive.
Right, we talked
You
a
know,
lot about that.
And I think we can do that if done right. And if, you know, if the narrative is that way and not just, again, you know, one side or the other, I think we can reach middle ground, and we can be environmentally sensitive, but yet loosen regulations and loosen zoning, so it's possible for developers and private, you know, builders to come in and build houses affordably for, you know, our
So,
buyers.
yeah, and so what's going on with Habitat for Humanity? I actually just met a gentleman, it was in Staples, and he was, you know, sharing his bag of woe as to what's been going on with them, that the amount of allotment for the house that has been handed over with state, isn't that state or is that federal?
I think it might be both, but
Or might be
yeah,
well, anyway, he says it's not meeting the criteria of the cost increase of what's happening. And so, you know, here we are again in a situation where the homeowner is trying to get a mortgage. They go in, they're getting assistance, and then all of a sudden now we have a situation where, because of COVID, the materials have gone up 15. I mean, you know this. This is
Right.
no new story to you. You're a builder.
yeah,
I mean, this is all we're hearing now with the
Right.
cost of construction.
yeah, yeah.
So how do you regulate that?
Well, you know, first and foremost, I think private sector can do a lot of things better than the government can. You know, so I want to encourage, you know, small businesses, small developers, private developers. You know, they tend to be more efficient than the government. I think we can all agree on that. And so, you know, we certainly need to, you know, look to them first before just naturally thinking, oh, the government's going to solve all of our problems.
Right.
You know, let's look to the private sector. Let's, you know, encourage, you know, developers to come in. Let's create zones maybe that are opportunity zones that are designated for, you know, development. That's you know, that people will accept without, you know, being environmentally sensitive in that sense. And let's look to see if the private sector can solve this issue. Now I know, you know, prices of things have gone up. You know,
It's astronomical what's
you know,
happening.
Right, and you know, realistically, a lot of that has to be done at the very top. The president is making a lot of those, you know, decisions, and you know, our government senators and representatives, you know, but we at this level of government can look to zoning and look to, you know, some incentives that will bring in the private sector to do this. I can't overstate the point that too often we just assume the government's going to do it, and it usually ends up costing 2 or 3 times what it should. So let's give the private sector a chance to solve the
That's
housing
an
industry.
interesting concept. That's an interesting concept. You know, which means that the person who's involved with the private sector, that the private sector has to have kind of an awareness of what's going on and what their awareness is. You know, I think if anything, and I know this was part of the plan without getting into the whole thing, is to start building awareness as to what's going on with us on every level,
Right.
whether it's educational, whether it's with the banking, whether it's with building, whether it's with, you know, the gas, the food, all of this stuff. You know,
Right.
because I think people are at this point now where they're like, what is going on here?
Right.
Life is unaffordable.
Right.
Life is much more difficult than it really is. Has to be, I would think, than it has to be.
Right.
I've been it's crazy, but I've been following this guy who's on Telegram, and he's always reporting in the cost of what it's like to live over in Russia. And he's walking around the supermarkets and he's showing you the same thing that we buy over here and the cost comparison. He goes out to his gas tank and and Russia's a big country. Russia, whatever, is going on over there. I know that, they're gold based and there's been a lot of changes going on over there. But, I mean, at what point do we start recognizing that, like you said, you got to take it back to at this point, the personal sector, private sector, of people becoming more vocal or more aware and really understanding, like, what power do they have? And that's the part that I've finally started to recognize through the whole, I don't even know what to call it, debauchery of 2020, is that, like, wait a minute, what really is going on here? Was it stolen? Was it not stolen? And, what went on here? What are my rights? And then all of a sudden you start realizing, without getting into the whole big thing of it, is that that we were violated. If our rights and our votes aren't meaning anything, then unfortunately, I think at some point we've got to no longer sit around because I hate complaining. I'm a big get out there and do something. Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
Get out there and do it.
Well, we fundamentally need representatives and senators that represent the people.
Yeah.
And listen to the people, and it can no longer be politics as the norm, and we need we can learn from the past. So and one thing I have learned from the past is the people haven't been necessarily had a voice, and I think the way our country was established is to have representatives that were ambassadors of the people, and
Well, you got to
I
look
think
at is the
a lot of
12 of them and the amendments. I mean, it's
Right.
all very clearly stated there.
I think a lot of the frustration of people has been they have felt like they haven't had a voice, and they haven't had someone who would listen to them and listen to what their point of view. And so I think as politicians, we need to have people in office that will listen to the people and give them a chance to voice their opinion, and that's what I hope to do.
So I think that's great, and I think it's wonderful, and I think it needs to happen. But then, of course, I go into the realm of, so what happens when all of this starts being able to be instituted? Then what happens when we get up to Montpelier?
Well, I mean, me personally, the promise I'm making to voters is, and this is what I can do as their senator. Okay, this is what I can do. I can't wave a magic wand and make all the problems go away.
That I understand.
But from a practical perspective, I can, enable their voice by, being transparent with what's going on in Montpelier, by posting on my website every week exactly what is going to be debated and exactly what is going to be voted on, and ask them.
We're going to post your website at the end of the show.
Right.
So people, and your email.
And ask the voters who voted for me to give their opinion on what's going on. And that way I can go and accurately be their ambassador at the government level.
So, but at one point, doesn't it have to, if the resistance is so strong up in Montpelier, then aren't we looking at petitions, at that point? That, if that's really where the representation's going to happen, then it's really about the power of the pen and getting a couple 10,000 or 8,000 enough people. I mean, when these issues start getting big enough.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, I think we have to really work hard and have some independent-minded people that are willing to set aside their own agendas and represent the people. And I think if we can slowly turn that, that perspective of politics around, and work hard to find partisan solutions to the issues, and I think we can do that. I really do if we're willing to, be open-minded and set aside all the political
All our
infighting.
egos and pride and all that stuff and our own agendas. I mean, I
And I'm
just,
talking at the state level,
right.
You know.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's got to start at the state level and work its way down if it's really going to be effective,
Right.
right?
Right, totally agree. I getting back to my personal life, it's so important that we make changes. And
Yeah, for our
at the government.
children and our great-children and our
for-
great-grandchildren.
Yeah, and from going back in our years of working at the soup kitchen in Bennington, for over 25 years, my wife and I fed the poor in Bennington and cooked for them and tried to encourage them and inspire them. So we saw the struggles
And
that
the
they have.
need.
Yeah, and the need, and and so many of those people had given up on government, given up on ever thinking they could, anybody would listen to them or they could incite change, and we need to listen to all Vermonters.
Well, I mean, I don't have to get into, I mean, that's the poor and humble and broken. I'm talking about just the average homeowner who's making us a living,
Yeah.
who's really struggling right now.
They're
And
so frustrated.
yeah.
And then and I come back to it, and they're so frustrated that all of a sudden, come in November, their tax bill is going to be
Through the roof.
5 to 15% more in most cases. That's $400, $500, $1,000 in some cases more, and where's that going to come from? On top of 20% inflation, over the last 5 years, a cumulative effect of almost 20%. Where's it going to come from? It's going to come from their food. It's their shopping.
Yeah,
bill
they're
all of
going
a
to have
sudden.
to cut somewhere. Probably
Yeah,
vacations.
And they've already made many cuts already. Vacations. Instead of having a steak, it's going to be a ham. and it's practical.
Turkey
but
burgers.
Yeah. It hurts. And
So,
it affects so many people.
I know this is a crazy assumption, but do you think that the influx of home sales from Vermonters is starting to reflect the fact that people who've lived in Vermont are now recognizing that they're facing a pretty impossible situation
Yeah.
and selling their houses and getting out and going to Texas and South Carolina and Florida? I mean, it's a big assumption, but you can't tell me with what I've seen in the last 4 years going on in the state of Vermont with the house sales. I mean, are these people leaving because of the timing? Are they leaving because they can no longer afford to live here? I mean, really, when you really think about it.
Yeah, I think, cost of homes is expensive all over the country. Let's be real. I'm sure there's cheaper areas here and there, but
compared to, I have a friend who's a real estate agent in Ohio. I have a friend who's a real estate agent out on Long Island. I have a friend that's a real estate agent down in Maryland. And they are nowhere near the sale of houses that we are experiencing up in Vermont. I mean, it's crazy.
yeah. Well, I look at it two ways. See, there's sales of houses, but also buying houses. There's a shortage of houses. So Vermont's beautiful. I wouldn't
Desirable.
I wouldn't want to live any other place. And I think that's clear by the amount of people that want to come to our state
Right.
and live here.
Right.
Um,
But what is making that person want to sell? That's what I wonder. Is it because they're old, they can't afford it, they don't want to be up here anymore? Are they dissatisfied with not having a voice in the I mean, with this kind of influx of sale in houses in Vermont, there's got to be a motivating factor without getting out and taking a poll. But
I have a hunch that a lot of people all of a sudden, because the house values have gone up so much, all of a sudden they see equity, in their house, and they might be tempted to sell because all of a sudden their house is worth so much more than it was.
Could be, but why aren't they leaving it for future generations?
Well,
I mean, I don't
get
get that.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
um,
So,
it
I don't
works
know.
both ways.
Yeah, it does. It's been a thought that's been in the back of my mind for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, there's just so many times I'll be driving down 7A and I'll see a house for sale, and then I'll go down like 2 days later and sold.
Yeah.
And go, I mean, just like whoosh, gone,
Right.
evaporated.
But see, that, that's good for the economy that houses are selling, but it also is raising the prices of houses, supply and demand, which is alienating the first-time home buyers and such because the prices are going up, that they can't afford it any longer. So we have to make Vermont affordable. We have to do what we can to make it affordable. And by continuing to allow the trend of raised taxes every year is not doing that. And so we have to be efficient. We have to have an efficient, effective government that doesn't waste money, that doesn't just throw, look at a problem and just
Good
throw.
money after bad.
It just, the solution to the problem is just to spend more, and that doesn't change things. It just kicks the can down the road. So we have to, have leaders who will, look into issues and look into the problems and see why it is the way it is and what they can do to make it, change those things.
So I want to hit one more point because I know there's a lot of stuff you want to deliver. But so I've noticed I've been in the, recovery arena for 22 years, and I've noticed that there are a lot of state-funded recovery centers that have been able to define, work, and get a problem addressed by offering this type of services. So that's been great. Turning Point, and there's just a lot of, and they're not just in Bennington. They're like in Rutland. They're in Brattleboro. They're in Burlington. So without getting into the crux of the whole thing, so that's a great solution. But what do we do about the real problem? I mean, the real problem of the influx of drug dealing, the amount of, and then it comes, then the next question it poses is, so what's going on with the law enforcement? But to me, I've known that this whole addiction thing is just a deprivation of spirit. It's a spirit. It's a spirit of deprivation. And so are these people just more susceptible? Or is that the fact that there's more drugs available? Or is it gotten to the point where there's not enough outreaches in the community to get to these people who are probably at this point borderline depressed, if not manic suicide? Because really, I mean, addiction becomes suicide after a while.
Yeah. Well, kind of all of the above.
Right.
I mean, clearly, we have to support our police. First and foremost.
Yeah, we need our police.
Police protect and serve and keep Vermont safe, and we need to support them with what they need to be effective in that sense. We can't be undermining them and expecting them to be able to do their job properly. So clearly we need our police, and we need to support them and respect them, frankly. They're the first line of defense with the drugs coming into the state. And I've seen them firsthand, and they are working very hard to stop that flow. And so we need to continue to support them in their efforts there. Once the drugs get here and people take them, and we have addicts and stuff, there's lots of, like you said, there's lots of programs.
Yeah, there's a lot of great programs out
There
here.
really is, and we should all support those as well. And again, I think the government can do a better job of supporting private programs that are the front lines and working to help these things. Churches, frankly, do really well. Some great outreaches, and we shouldn't, just because they're a church, say we can't support what they do.
Right.
What they do
I'm a
is
big
what
any
is
and all
needed.
of it.
Yeah.
Any of all and all of it. I mean, it's going to take. It's going to. We say it takes a village. It's going to take a town. It's
Yeah.
going to take a state
Yeah.
to really work through this issue.
Right. I mean, to make that point, if everyone did what they could, did their part, it'll help turn those things around. But we have to stop the flow of drugs over the border into Vermont.
Yeah,
And then
from
once
all-
they're here, we have to have organizations that will work with those who have been affected by those drugs and encourage them, give them a hope and a reason to fight their way back onto their feet, a hand up.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, after 22 years, there's been some really wonderful cases to watch. I mean, I had a friend that was taken out in a body bag because he had overdosed, and luckily the guy that was on the rescue squad recognized him and gave him a couple more not Suboxone, but what's the stuff they give you to bring you back?
Yeah.
He just doubled it up and he came back. And I mean, it's amazing to see him today.
Yeah.
And then I always think back to, well, what happened if the person didn't recognize him? He'd just be another statistic. But I mean, to me, it's a real problem. It's
and to that same point, a little bit of a rabbit trail from that, but we and I think you have too, worked in prisons. My wife and I were a volunteer for the Vermont Department of Corrections for a number of years in different realms. But one of the things I noticed from working there, and we were basically part of the aftercare. After they had done their time, they were trying to get back into society. And
matriculate back into society.
And so often the deck is just stacked against them.
Yep.
And they get released from jail. I think really most of them in their hearts, they want to do what's right. They want to straighten their life out, and they want to be good citizens again. But because they have a record, employers aren't hiring them.
But there are a couple of people in Bennington that are allowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that it really is, they have trouble getting jobs, they have trouble getting housing.
Sure.
And
All
we
of
need to
it.
look for ways that we can support that. Because if they are let back into society and put in a position to fail and ultimately fail, what happens? They
go back.
Crime. And so we need to find ways that it's one thing to make one mistake, but we don't want people making the same mistake twice.
Over and over and over again.
And so, if they've made a mistake and done their time, let's try to support them so they can get back into society, because our jails are filled full of repeat offenders, and we got to make sure we support them. So
Absolutely.
and so our justice system and our police force isn't struggling with repeat offenders. We need to.
Yeah, I mean, I get all of that, and I realize, that's been so much of what, Bob and I have been wanting that we worked for. We did our 10 years, and it's tough. Like I said, I've been out in that arena for 22 years, and it's just really tough, having to deal with all of the things that are already set up that are happening. So, anyway, we're going to get to the end of our show. And I just was hoping that, I know you've got some PowerPoints that you wanted to nail, because this time is so important. And I think right now we've got to really, forget about smelling the roses, forget about smelling the coffee. We've just basically got to wake up. And we've got to look, listen, and be proactive. If this is really reality, we've got to figure out that it's us, our voices, our vote, our taxes, who we are, that are going to make the difference.
Right.
So take it away.
Well, I just kind of wanted to state some of the issues that are facing Vermonters, and what we can do to change those things. One is, is independent-minded individuals in Vermont. We need to put party politics aside and work for Vermonters. Work for Vermonters, not, agendas. You need to put all that infighting, all the politics aside, and work for the will of the people. We need to avoid taxes and bring fiscal discipline to the Senate and to the government.
I don't think there's anybody that's going to argue with that one.
We have to do that. We can't just assume that we can keep spending at the rate that we're spending at. We need to bring fiscal discipline.
What's our deficit?
Yeah.
34 trillion?
We have to work hard to find partisan solutions and reduce education costs. You know, again, it's not that ship's not going to turn around overnight, but we can't keep on this trend that we're at of just spending more and more and more and more and more. When we have to, the only way to do that is if we're going to do that, it has to be find partisan solutions to that. We can't keep the trend of wasteful spending. We have to find ways to lower property taxes, which will, in fact, like as we were speaking about, lower rental costs and make home ownership more affordable. But the easiest way to do that is to stop the increased taxes all the time. We have to work to ensure that quality childcare is possible for all working Vermonters.
Absolutely.
That's just a must. Our families, you know, are mostly two-income society now, and we have to make sure that the children are taken care of. We have to reduce unneeded regulations that will encourage more businesses, more new business startups, which is vital to the Vermont economy.
I agree.
Vermont needs small businesses, needs new businesses, and we have to reduce the unneeded regulations. We can be environmentally sensitive and reduce regulations. And finally, like I said before, I want to make sure we support our police with everything they need to protect and serve and make Vermont a place that we feel safe walking down the street. You know, and I think there's no excuse for that, and we have to be a safe place. And I want to make sure that Vermont is safe and people feel safe, and we have to support our police who are there to keep us safe. And like we said at the very beginning of the show, my biggest goal and biggest reason for running is to, you know, give the people of Bennington County a greater voice in government. You know, so many things happen and affect us all, and yet we don't even realize we had no voice in it, and we didn't realize it happened until after the fact. And so, like I said before, I will post on my website every week that legislature's in session. I will post on there what is being debated and what is going to be voted on, and I will ask the people of Bennington County to respond and tell me their feelings and their concerns and their opinions on those issues so that I can accurately represent them. And this is before things are voted on, not
Right.
after the fact.
Not after the fact. Not shutting the door after the horse is out.
The way it is now, things get pushed through and strapped to the back of Vermonters, and it's when after the fact it's too late. And so that I want to change that. I want to change. I want to bring government transparency. I want people to know what's happening, what's being spent, how it's being spent, and I want you to. And by doing that, I hope to empower their voices again.
Absolutely.
And,
I mean, I
that's
think
just my
people have
goal.
been just so silent for so long and have just kind of taken it for so long until they can't take it anymore.
Right.
And I think that's why I think it's so critical at this time, the injunction of where we are right now for people, because I think people have had it. I mean, I know people have had it.
Right. And after the fact, after laws are passed and bills are voted on, is not the time for Vermonters to voice.
Appeal.
Yeah, to appeal.
Forget it.
You
It's
know,
already through.
Right. You need to know about things ahead of time, and you need to know about things as they're happening, and I want to bring that transparency to the
Speaking
government.
of which, and I know this has nothing to do with Vermont, but Massachusetts, they just pushed a law through banning all semi-automatics.
Really? Yeah.
And didn't bring it to the people to vote on.
Yeah,
It just
that's
got
the
pushed
stuff that
right through,
happens.
and now all of a sudden they're like, what? You know, it's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And people's, you know what people's attitudes are that are in Massachusetts? I don't care, I'll just keep mine.
Yeah.
You know, but just the fact that that happened.
Right. Unacceptable. Yeah.
Right. So, and you know, here's a point where at least, you know, you can, I guess they call them whistleblowers, you can start blowing the whistle on what's going on, you know, with all of these pretty much
It's just
legislations that
yeah,
are,
It's just transparency. Hey,
Right.
this is what's happening. You know, I want you to
Yeah.
realize this before it's too late, before you get the bill for it.
yeah,
you
before
know?
you get the receipt. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, you know how we feel about it. We just, I mean, my husband and I, we're ready, you know, we're ready to support you in any which way you can. And I'm kind of excited because you were telling me there's 2 seats open, and then we have another person in the Republican, Joe Jarvis, who's also running, who kind of feels the same way you do. And there's a guy up in Rutland, Mike Berry, kind of feels the same way.
Yeah.
And I'm like at the point, well, this is what needs to happen. I think we have to get to this threshold where enough is enough. And if we're going to keep Vermont, you know, what do they say? You know, you want to keep what's in Vermont, Vermont. And at this point in time, I think we're getting to a phase where people are getting disheartened. They're selling their places. They're moving out. And I think it's going to push people to start having a larger voice, or at least what you're trying to encourage will be to empower them.
Yeah. Exactly.
To know that, you know, as a property-paying citizen or a tax-paying citizen, you do have power. I mean, I think that's what we've forgotten.
Yeah. And we didn't have time to get into the carbon tax bill that they're pushing forward, and will probably be enacted if some different legislators aren't elected this semester
To
in
change
November.
it.
Yeah, I mean, and some estimates will be almost $3 a gallon to our fuel oil in the winter to pay for these things.
On top of what we have?
On top of all these things.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time
And
just
this
with
is
what's
another one of
going.
those cases where they're passing these bills and pushing these agendas.
And nobody knows what's going.
About it until the bill comes. And so, again, I want to make sure Vermonters know what's going on. I want to know what's going to affect them, and especially affect their wallets. And I want to give them a chance, a voice again.
Okay, well, we are speaking with Spike Whitmire, who is running for State Senate of Vermont, Bennington County. You have been watching Recovery from Religion, where we come to learn to live in the acceptance of our losses and look for the hope and healing through Jesus Christ. And hopefully this year, this season, this November, you will be able to get past what happened in 2020 and get out there and vote. So thank you for joining us, and God bless.
We are all wounded children, needing arms of grace to hold us through the darkest hours and lead us to